Kumiko, Hideki, and little Rumi, now 5 years old, were living an ideal life. With much assistance from Kumiko's father, the family had purchased a beautiful home in one of the city's most desirable suburbs. Hideki had climbed to one of the highest positions in the company, also with much assistance from Kumiko's father. This afforded Kumiko the opportunity to quit her job at the flower shop and devote herself full-time to her family. On one quiet evening, Kumiko and Hideki sat at the dining room table to have a conversation about their daughter. "Rumi's teacher called me today," said Hideki. "She told me that Rumi's still not getting along with the other kids. It's just a phase that kids go through," replied Kumiko. "I was the same way when I was her age." "You have to do something about this," said Hideki. "Rumi's teacher told me that she's talked to you about this more than once and you're not taking it seriously. If we don't do something about this, then it could lead to bigger problems in the future. You still worry too much about things," said Kumiko. "You're doing it again," said Hideki. "Doing what?" asked Kumiko. "Acting like Rumi can do no wrong," replied Hideki. "You act like she's perfect. That's because Rumi-chan is perfect," said Kumiko. "She's quiet and obedient, not like all those little monsters that run around destroying everything. I want her to do those things," said Hideki. "Because it's normal. That's what kids are supposed to do." "Are you saying Rumi-chan isn't normal?" asked Kumiko. "That's not what I said. Rumi-chan is normal," said Kumiko. "There's nothing wrong with her. You would know that if you spent more time with her." "I can't spend as much time with her as you do because of work," explained Hideki. "Even so, she's always with you. She clings to you like she's your shadow. She won't let anyone else get close to her. There's nothing wrong with her being attached to me," insisted Kumiko. "I'm her mother. That's how it's supposed to be. Is this because of ... "No," exclaimed Kumiko, cutting off Hideki before he could finish his thought. It was clear that Kumiko was now upset because of what her husband had tried to say. "I thought I told you never to bring that up. I thought since it had been 5 years that maybe it would be okay to talk about," said Hideki. "You think something like this goes away just because a few years have passed? It's going to be with us forever." "I'm sorry," said Hideki. "Maybe we should just take Rumi-chan out of that school," said Kumiko. "Find her a better one with better teachers. It's the best school in the city," said Hideki. "I have some errands to run in the city tomorrow," said Kumiko. "I think I'll take Rumi-chan with me. It'll do her good to get away from those kids for a while." Rumi entered holding a drawing she had made. "I made this for you, Mommy," she said, handing it to Kumiko. "Let's take a look," said a smiling Kumiko. The picture was of little Rumi and her mother holding hands. "I love it. How come I'm not in the picture?" asked Hideki. Rumi turned her attention to her father briefly before giving her full attention back to her mother. "This is a picture of me and you at the park," said Rumi. "I love the park," said Kumiko. "Would you like for me to take you there tomorrow?" Rumi smiled and nodded her head. "I have to call the office," said Hideki before departing. While her mother marveled at the drawing, Rumi watched with disdain as her father departed. The next day Kumiko took Rumi with her to run errands in the city. It was the most ideal of days. The sun was shining brightly and the sky was a perfect shade of blue. Kumiko couldn't help but smile as she led Rumi by the hand. It was the most simple of acts, but it meant so much to her. "Rumi-chan," announced Kumiko, "I have a question for you." "What is your favorite food?" "Melon bread," exclaimed Rumi. "Melon bread?" asked Kumiko. "That's my favorite too." "Here's another question. What is Rumi-chan's favorite animal?" "Cats," replied Rumi. "I likes cats too," replied Kumiko. "Do you think we'll see some cats in the park today?" "We're going to see 1,000,000 cats," exclaimed Rumi. "Let's see if I can think of another question." "I can answer anything," said Rumi. "Okay, Rumi-chan," said Kumiko. "Who is your favorite person in the whole entire world?" "Mommy's my favorite person," exclaimed Rumi. "And Rumi-chan is my favorite person." After running her errands, Kumiko took Rumi to their favorite bakery to buy melon bread. The pair then visited the local park so they could relax and enjoy their sweet treat. As the pair sat on a bench and ate their melon bread, Kumiko decided it would be as good a time as any to talk to Rumi about her behavior at school. "How are things going at school, Rumi-chan?" asked Kumiko. "Good," replied Rumi, her mouth full of bread. "Your teacher told me that you don't like the other kids. Is that true?" "They're a bunch of babies," replied Rumi. "Everything makes them cry. You have to try to get along with them, Rumi-chan. Don't you want to have lots of friends?" "I don't need friends," said Rumi. "All I need is you." Kumiko wasn't sure what to think or how to respond. Her phone then began ringing, shaking her from her state. "Hello," answered Kumiko. From the corner of her eye she found a cat walking nearby, which had clearly caught Rumi's attention. The curious girl hopped off the bench and began following. "Don't wander too far," said Kumiko. Rumi followed the cat to a short distance away from the bench. It stopped briefly so that it could bathe itself. "Good morning, Mr. Cat," said Rumi. "What are your plans for today?" The cat finished bathing and departed further into a wooded area. Rumi made no hesitation and eagerly followed. So wrapped up in her conversation, Kumiko hadn't noticed Rumi wander off until after she had hung up. "Rumi-chan, let's head back home, okay?" she announced. There was no answer. Scanning the area, Kumiko found nary a trace of her daughter. "Rumi-chan," she called out. "Rumi-chan." After again receiving no response, panic began to set it. Kumiko headed in the direction she hoped Rumi had gone. Her trek took her to the wooded area. Kumiko's heart sank when she found Rumi's melon bread lying on the ground. "Rumi-chan," shouted Kumiko. Venturing further into the wooded area, Kumiko found Rumi in the distance crouching down with her back turned. "Rumi-chan," shouted Kumiko, now running frantically to her. Upon reaching her daughter, Kumiko wrapped her arms around Rumi. "Please don't ever leave like that again." "Mr. Cat won't wake up," said Rumi, who had been crouching by the cat she had been following. The cat that had been so full of life just minutes ago was now lying dead on the ground. Its neck had been broken. Seeing this, Kumiko quickly led Rumi away. That night, Kumiko and Hideki had a discussion about the events of the day. Kumiko had spent most of the day concealing how distraught she was for fear that it would upset Rumi. But now that her daughter had gone up to bed, Kumiko was able to allow all of her worry to pour out. "I only took my eyes off her for a few minutes," sobbed Kumiko. "I didn't think she would wander off like that." "It's okay," said Hideki. "Rumi was never in any danger. It's a safe park. Nothing ever happens there." "But something could have happened," replied Kumiko. "And it would have been all my fault. I'm supposed to protect Rumi-chan. If she can't depend on me, then who can she depend on? You've been under a lot of stress lately. It's understandable that you would take this so hard, but you don't have to. It all turned out fine." "It isn't stress," said Kumiko. "I'm just a bad mother." Unbeknownst to the couple, Rumi was sitting on the stairs and listening intently to their conversation. She was eating the melon bread her mother had purchased for her as a token of contrition for temporarily losing her. The calm demeanor in which Rumi listened made it seem as if she had no sympathy for her mother who was breaking down before her. "It wasn't your fault," said Hideki. "Your mind was somewhere else. How could it not be? Your mother had just told you that your father's health is getting worse, and we're trying to have another baby. To be honest, my mind has been all over the place the last few months as well." "We should visit my father soon," said Kumiko. "I think it will make him feel better to see us." "That's a good idea," said Hideki. "Are you still going to your doctor's appointment tomorrow?" "Yes," replied Kumiko. "I can't afford to miss it." A sound on the stairs prompted Hideki to look in that direction. The only thing out of the ordinary was Rumi's Mr. Clown doll lying on one of the stairs. The day was just like any ordinary day. Kumiko had gotten Rumi up bright and early and whisked her off to school. Her daughter was showing no adverse effects from what had happened to her the previous day, making Kumiko the only one dwelling on the unfortunate event. Nothing out of the ordinary took place that morning at school. Rumi would occasionally take peeks at the clock on the wall, but that was quite normal for kids who could tell time, as they were quite eager for recess to begin. Between peeks at the clock, Rumi would feverishly doodle on a piece of paper. Her artwork consisted of a man wearing a long white lab coat. The ferocity with which Rumi was drawing made her seem like a little girl possessed. One perplexed boy was staring at Rumi. When Rumi noticed he was staring at her, she pulled out a pair of scissors and snipped at the air. All the while a menacing look covered her face. The now terrified boy quickly averted his gaze. With her black crayon, Rumi angrily scribbled over the man in her picture until there was nothing left of him. Recess arrived shortly thereafter, and the eager children sprinted to the playground. A few of the fortunate ones were able to claim a swing before the others could. Rumi was surprisingly fast, so she was the first to claim one. The children were well aware of how to use the equipment in a responsible manner, but those rules would have to go by the wayside today, as Rumi immediately began swinging as high as she could go. The other children noticed and were quick to point out to Rumi that what she was doing was wrong. "Rumi-chan," exclaimed one of the boys. "Teacher says you're not supposed to go so high." "You can't tell me what to do," exclaimed Rumi. Once she had reached her peak, Rumi let go of the swing. She seemed almost weightless as she soared high above the ground. Gravity would show her no mercy, however, so with a most unpleasant thud, Rumi crashed to the ground. She immediately let out a horrific series of screams, prompting the other children to run for help. Kumiko was called by Rumi's teacher after the accident. She got to the school as quickly as she could and took her daughter away for the rest of the day. Fortunately for Rumi, Kumiko had her doctor's appointment that day, so she would take her daughter with her to get checked for any potential injuries. Rumi was the ideal patient as Dr. Kojima cleaned and bandaged her injuries. There was no crying nor even a wince from her as the good doctor tended to Rumi. She calmly sipped from a juice box and made nary a peep. Rumi had suffered only a few minor cuts and bruises to her arms and legs, making a trip to the doctor a bit overkill. But Kumiko had insisted she take her daughter from school and have her checked out. "You were very lucky your mama had an appointment to see me today," Dr. Kojima told Rumi. "That way I could see the both of you at once. 2 birds with 1 stone." Rumi gave no response and merely stared at the doctor, all the while sipping from her juice box. "Moving on," said a now nervous Dr. Kojima, taking a seat behind his desk. He immediately began scanning Kumiko's file. "How have you been sleeping?" he asked. "Not very well, I'm afraid," replied Kumiko. "You have a lot of weight on your shoulders these days, don't you?" said Dr. Kojima. "I saw your father last week. I don't know how much time he has left, but it's not much. I was wondering if you had something stronger to help me get to sleep," said Kumiko. A nurse entered the room and carefully placed a cup of coffee on the doctor's desk before quickly departing. "Ah, thank you very much," he said. "Where was I?" the doctor asked himself. He then took a sip of his coffee. He winced and quickly placed the coffee back on his desk. "She always makes it too hot." Dr. Kojima then opened one of his desk drawers and began rummaging. "A new pill just came out a few weeks. Is it stronger than what you've been giving me?" asked Kumiko. Dr. Kojima retrieved a bottle of pills and gave them to Kumiko. "They're quite a bit stronger," he said. "So you have to make sure to take only 2 before going to bed. Please don't take any more than that. Just put them in a glass of water and they'll dissolve quickly." "Thank you very much," said Kumiko. Do you have my anxiety pills?" "Yes," said Dr. Kojima, retrieving another bottle of pills from his desk. "Please remember not to mix these 2 medications." The doctor then took a quick peek at Rumi. "Can we discuss the rest in another room?" he asked. The subject about to be discussed was far more personal than a mere sleep disorder or anxiety. "Of course," said Kumiko. "Rumi-chan, you wait here, okay? I'm going to talk to the doctor for a few minutes and then we can go home." Rumi smiled and nodded to her mother before she and the doctor took their leave. Dr. Kojima took Kumiko to a nearby exam room. "The results are the same as last time," he told Kumiko. "There's too much scar tissue on the uterus. The fact that you were able to have Rumi was nothing short of a miracle. But the problems you had during the delivery only made things worse, much, much worse." Kumiko immediately began crying. "I just thought if we could have another child, then things would get better," said Kumiko. "Rumi-chan is having problems with the other kids at school. If she could have a little brother or sister, then she would open up more with other kids. She only wants to be with me all the time." Dr. Kojima sighed. "I think maybe we should cut back on your anxiety medication." "No, please don't," said Kumiko. "I need it. I'm not supposed to be prescribing these to you," said the doctor. "I only do it as a favor to your father." Rumi was waiting patiently for her mother in Dr. Kojima's office. She couldn't help but look around the room at all the interesting things. But what really grabbed her attention were the pills in her mother's purse. She took the bottles and, with a little struggle, was able to get their lids off. Her attention then focused on the cup of coffee upon Dr. Kojima's desk. Kumiko and Dr. Kojima returned a few minutes later, and Rumi and her mother took their leave. The car ride home was quiet. Kumiko usually had plenty to say to her daughter, but the news she had received left her in no mood to converse. "Why were you crying?" asked Rumi. "What do you mean?" asked Kumiko. "When you came back your eyes were red," replied Rumi. "Did the doctor say something mean to you?" "It was nothing," said Kumiko. "Were you talking about Grandpa?" Yes, we were talking about him. He's been sick for a while." Kumiko became silent as she thought about her father's situation. She perked up quickly, however, as not to upset Rumi. "We're going to see him soon, that will make him feel better." "I can't wait to see Grandpa," said Rumi. Later in the day, a nurse knocked on Dr. Kojima's door. "Doctor," she said after not receiving a reply. The nurse opened the door to find the doctor face down on his desk. "Doctor, are you okay?" she asked, carefully making her way closer. "Doctor?" She shook him, but that did her no good. She immediately felt the doctor's wrist for a pulse and placed her ear against his chest. There were no signs of life. "Somebody help!" Unaware of what had happened to Dr. Kojima, Kumiko blissfully went about her life. She got Rumi up bright and early the next day and took her to school. Kumiko knelt before Rumi just outside the school. "Now Rumi-chan, I want you to be a good girl, okay?" she said. Rumi smiled and nodded. "You make sure to be nice to the other kids and be extra nice to Miss Ito." Kumiko then handed Rumi a box wrapped neatly with a bow. "I baked cookies for your teacher," she said. "So give them to her as soon as you see her." "I can do that," said a smiling Rumi. "You're such a good girl," said Kumiko before hugging Rumi and departing. Upon entering the school, Rumi found a trash can and promptly threw the box of cookies into it. Later in the day, Rumi was passing the time with her favorite activity. The young girl almost seemed to be in a trance as she drew her colorful art pieces. Rumi's teacher, Miss Ito, knelt down beside her student. "That's such a pretty picture, Rumi-chan," she said. "Are you drawing a picture of yourself?" "No," replied Rumi, who continued drawing. "Is it one of your friends here at school?" "I don't have any friends," replied Rumi. Like before, Rumi kept her focus squarely on her drawing. "You can try to make friends," said Miss Ito. "There are lots of nice boys and girls here. You can ask to play with them instead of always sitting alone and drawing. Or maybe you could draw with some of the others. I know Shota likes to draw. I don't like Shota. How about Minami? I think you two would be good friends." "I don't like Minami." "Why don't you like them?" asked Miss Ito. "What makes them think they're so special?" asked Rumi, who seemed not to be talking to Miss Ito but to herself. "I'm just as good as they are." "Of course you're just as good as them," said Miss Ito. "Do you ever feel like you're not good enough?" Rather than respond, Rumi placed her latest work of art in front of her face. "Look, I finished my picture. It's very nice," said Miss Ito. But Rumi-chan, before Miss Ito could continue asking questions that Rumi was in no real mood to answer, Rumi cut her off. "This is Takayo," she said. "Oh, I recognize her," said Miss Ito. "You've drawn your friend before, haven't you?" Rumi lowered the picture and became quite solemn. "She's not my friend," she said. "She's no one's friend, no one likes her." When Kumiko came to pick up Rumi after school, Miss Ito pulled her aside to talk with her. "Rumi-chan still isn't making friends," she said. "I've been talking to her, but nothing is working. She's just so cold around the other children. My husband and I set up play dates with our friends' children," said Kumiko, "but she never seems interested at all. I think she might be a little shy around other children. All she does is sit alone and draw," said Miss Ito. "Her pictures are almost always of the same little girl. For the life of me, I can't remember what her name was." "I think she wants a little baby sister," said Kumiko. "Me and my husband have been trying to get pregnant, but we've been having a difficult time, with her concerns failing to alarm a mother who clearly saw her daughter through rose-colored glasses." Miss Ito dropped yet another piece of troubling information upon her. "I found the box of cookies you made for me in the trash," she said. "I think Rumi-chan just got a little confused," insisted Kumiko. "She's never given anyone a gift before. I'm sure she knew you would know where to find it." Another parent waved Miss Ito over, giving her a much-needed reason to excuse herself. The family sat down to have dinner that night. Long gone were the days where Kumiko and Hideki were forced to sustain themselves with meager meals of rice and vegetables. Kumiko's food budget would surely have made her former self more than a bit envious. "So, Rumi-chan, how was school?" asked Hideki. "Good," replied Rumi. Whenever her father asked her any sort of question, Rumi's answer was usually only a word or two, making her recent answer nothing out of the ordinary. "Did anything exciting happen?" asked Kumiko. "Akio spilled his milk all over himself at lunch," said Rumi. "He started crying. It was funny." "Seeing bad things happen to people shouldn't make you happy," said Hideki. Rumi gave her father no response. She merely went about eating her dinner. Kumiko tucked Rumi in later that night. She told her to get good sleep, because the next day they would be leaving early to see her grandfather. The house was eerily dark that night, as black clouds had blocked out the moon, and nary a sound was heard within the smother of shadows. Kumiko had fallen fast asleep with the aid of sleeping pills. In far too deep a sleep, Kumiko was unable to see that Rumi was now standing at her bedside. Her daughter took the utmost of care to not wake her mother as she climbed onto the bed and on top of Kumiko. "I love you the most," whispered Rumi. She then proceeded to wrap her hands around her mother's throat and squeeze the life out of her. Kumiko awoke, gasping desperately for breath. She sat up and immediately placed her hand on her throat. With a heart nearly pounding out of the chest, Kumiko began scanning the room but found nothing out of the ordinary. Hideki had been woken by all of the noise and turned on a lamp. "What's wrong?" he asked. Thinking what she had experienced was nothing more than a nightmare, Kumiko began calming down. "It was nothing," she said. "Just a bad dream." Looking to her bedside, Kumiko found Rumi's Mr. Clown doll lying on the floor.